Hello people, it's been quite a while. I've been busy with other things, but today I wanted to talk about the Mafia Definitive Edition, which of course is a remake of the original Mafia, City of Lost Heaven. And I gotta say, I enjoyed my time through this game, but as much as I enjoyed this title, I have to say it does have distinct differences from the original game, and whether that's for better or worse is gonna be dependent on who you ask. Now, of course, there were going to be aspects that would be extremely different, like the presentation for one. The visuals are pretty damn good in my eyes. The updated City of Lost Heaven looks absolutely beautiful to me, whether it's day or night, but it especially looks fantastic on rainy nights with its shining lights and reflections. It just oozes with a distinct atmosphere I like, and that's the thing, the game pulls off the 1930s atmosphere really well. On top of that, the new models look great, whether it's weapons, environments, vehicles, or characters, and they're animated pretty well. Not the absolute best, but there's a good sense of emotion and attention to detail. And outside of the visuals, the sound design is good too, whether it's guns, vehicles, the cityscape, and of course the music. The opening score is just as fantastic as I remember. Continuing from this, the voice acting is good too.
That's true too. And still, Morello left that poor sap dead in the street, head all caved in.
And yes, it's very different from the original, but I find there's a real sense of emotion in its execution, which is an upgrade. I don't care how nostalgic you are, the original voice acting felt awkward and deadpan. Not all of the voices, of course, but it felt pretty robotic at times.
We got you, you little rat. Mr. Morello's pretty angry with you. We're gonna have to teach you a little lesson so you remember that it ain't right.
But in this game, it feels more natural, although Polly might take a bit of time to get used to. Other voices have been changed too, of course, with new accents as well. But outside of the presentation, what about the gameplay? Well, here's another area that feels very different due to reasons you'd expect, with others that may or may not bother certain people. The aspect that caught my attention was the mission structure. You see, the original Mafia would give you your objective, and when you were at the mission location, you had to explore a bit or talk to certain NPCs to gather information or a means to accomplish your task. You had to pay a bit more attention to your environments, whereas in this game, it feels more handholdy with a mini-map that has a bunch of markers, HUD indicators, or messages that tell you where to go or where there's points of interest. It doesn't feel like you're actively looking for information or a means to complete the mission, it just feels like it's being handed to you. And this is probably the aspect that'll piss off veterans. And personally, I would have just liked the option to turn off these markers and indicators, but as far as I can tell, you can't. But you know what, I don't know if this is gonna bother most people, and honestly, it didn't bother me enough to stop playing. I still had fun and enjoyed other aspects like the story, driving, and shooting. And I think these are the aspects that most people are interested in. There's also stealth segments, but they're nothing really special. Nothing great, but nothing terrible either. So I'm gonna focus on the other aspects. I'll start off with the driving. It's pretty damn enjoyable to me. I played on the classic difficulty, which forces you to drive on the simulation mode, but there's a regular mode that feels a bit more light and responsive. But I'd recommend giving simulation a try. There's a good sense of weight behind the vehicles that makes it fun. It's especially satisfying when you get a good handle for it and get through high-speed chases. It's quite enjoyable. The only time it's not enjoyable is during that race. This mission still makes me want to blow my fucking brains out, but other than that, I had fun driving. But outside of the driving, what about the combat? Well, I'll just get this out of the way. The melee combat is pretty ass. It just feels janky and lacks engagement. You're just spamming the attack button, dodging through a huge window, and doing these finishers. It's not horrible, it's just really whatever. But melee combat isn't really a big focus of this game, but shooting is. And I gotta say, I enjoyed the gunplay. Combat scenarios can be pretty lethal, at least on the classic difficulty. I've died a few times due to my own lack of caution. So you really want to make use of cover, moving between it to close in on enemies or to flank them. Or you want to stick to cover so you can wait for that vital moment to land a headshot. But doing so may not be as simple because enemies are pretty aggressive at this difficulty setting, so you have less time to aim your shot before being shot yourself. And on top of that, you may not land all your shots either. You're not over the top accurate in this game. You're not playing a former soldier, you're playing a former cab driver turned mafioso. You're still pretty deadly considering those things, but you're not some insane sharpshooter. So depending on the weapon, angle, and distance you're shooting from, you might actually miss a few shots. And on top of that, your arm wavers a bit while aiming, lessening your accuracy that bit more. And the thing is that you want to make your shots count. You can't just fire 3 shots then reload your weapon because it'll actually waste the rest of the clip on classic difficulty. So when you have 3 bullets left in that magazine, just make sure they mean something. But with all these things taken into consideration, you're still a formidable force for a former cab driver. I mean, you're committing fucking massacres and shooting enemies is just fun. The blood effects and the death animations are pretty gruesome and satisfying. Shooting can be pretty engaging and enjoyable. So we've talked about the presentation, mission structure, driving, and shooting. Last thing is the storytelling. Now the story is still engaging to me. You take the role of Tommy Angelo, a cab driver turned mob enforcer for the Salieri crime family. You're thrust into the criminal underworld and you'll be reliving those business ventures from 1930 to 1938 in the city of Lost Heaven. And boy, you've gone through a lot of shit. The writing has been changed, but the overall story stays familiar. There's some small differences in certain story points, but there's significant changes with the characters' personalities, with some feeling smaller. For one, Sarah actually has a distinct personality, which I like, while other characters feel different as well, like Don Salieri. He can be a bit more brutal this time around, but even main characters like Tommy feel different. This Tommy Angelo feels colder and grittier. He still has that semblance of guilt and remorse, but he feels a lot harder and seasoned in this game, and I don't necessarily think that's better or worse, I just think it's distinctly different, but I enjoyed this version of Tommy, and that's the thing. I enjoyed most of the characters, I think the writing was well done and the story was engaging. On top of that, the game has newly added dialogue during driving sequences too, which really takes out the boredom I had from the original game. So all in all, I enjoyed my time with the Mafia Definitive Edition. I liked the visuals, sound, driving, shooting, and story. The only thing that may be problematic for veterans or maybe just certain people is that the missions feel more hand-holdy, but it didn't really ruin my time with this game. I enjoyed myself overall, except for that racing mission. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Peace.